This video is the third of 4 videos for the central nervous system, and we'll focus specifically on memory. Memory is the ability to store an experience and retrieve it. And as you know, as a person, as an adult in college, the retrieval is the tricky part to memory. And if you look at 3 major phases of memory, the first is called storage, and then second is processing, and then 3 is actual traces or memory traces in the brain. And what we'll discuss primarily in this presentation is the storage of the memory and some of the major stages and how it happens. And we know that the storage of the memory is always continually changing because our environment is continually changing. The way it works and how it works, the processing of the memory occurs in some structures called the hippocampus and areas within the internal core of the brain. And then physically what happens are called the memory traces, and we'll learn that these are chemical or physical changes that happen between synapses in the brain. And so if you look at the stages of memory, you've probably heard this term is short-term memory. I've abbreviated here STM. You can also call it working memory or fleeting memory, but I think probably short-term memory might be more familiar to you. And as the name implies, it is a short-term memory, and it lasts only a few seconds, maybe upwards of an hour, but the ability for it to store information is pretty limited to about 7 to 8 pieces of information. So for example, a phone number, right? I could say my office phone number, 733-7553, and I could ask you to remember that long enough until you could write it down or record it in your voice recorder or whatever the case may be. So can you repeat to me my number again? If you're in the Midwest city area, it's probably even easier for you if you're from here. Do you know the 733 prefix? So that's familiar. So really you only had to learn the 7553. So you actually cut it down to 4 pieces of memory, versus someone who's maybe from California. They've got to know 733, 7553. They may even need to know the 405 prefix. And so depending on what we'll learn, your previous experiences, right, how you retain information, you're going to do better at retaining a short-term memory if you keep it to smaller bits of information. Contrasting that to long-term memory is considered to have limitless capacity. And as an adult in summer school, in college, you know that maybe that's a falsification, but in theory we have the ability to kind of retain everything that we experience. So the question is then, well, how can we actually transfer something from a short-term to a long-term experience? And some key things that help aid in this transfer is having an adequate emotional state, right? So being balanced, if you will. When you're awake and not in a coma, you're paying attention and you're motivated, right, to the scenario. Okay, so say, for example, your favorite concert, okay? You're probably going to remember an event from that versus something in this video lecture, right? You're going to be more motivated to pay attention to every detail in that concert versus maybe the information in this video. So emotional state's important. As well as a student, you know that rehearsing information is really important for converting a short-term to a long-term memory. So however you go about it, whether it be verbally or through a song or writing, right, some type of, right, whatever you experience. So whatever you do, practicing or repeating the experience is going to help transfer that experience from a short-term into a long-term memory. As well as the example I gave previously, like associating. If you associate new information with something that's already in your memory, you're going to have a better time remembering that. So, for example, when we studied metabolism in Chapter 3, if that was your 3rd time to study it, you had it in microbiology and you had it in Gen Bio, you have something, a point of reference. When I said Krebs cycle or electron transport chain. You had something tangible, 2 other classes to tie that back to. So your ability to learn the Krebs cycle in better detail would be more than someone who has not had intro bio or has not had microbio, has never even heard of the electron transport chain. You've got those old memories in which you can tie this new experience with. And so association is a good way to convert a short-term experience to a long-term experience. There's also something that facilitates short-term to long-term memory transfer, and it's called automatic memory. And honestly, I don't fully understand how it works, but our brain has the ability to retain some experiences without us consciously rehearsing or associating the experience. And so it's called automatic memory. Our brain kind of stores information, and we can recall it later, even though we didn't actively convert it to a long-term memory. These things are summarized for you in this picture shown here and also in your handout. So if you look at how we learn something, first you have to experience it. So you can see something, feel something, taste something, smell something, whatever the case, you can hear, whatever the case may be. And then following the pathway in the red box, right, your brain's going to temporarily store everything that you feel, touch, taste, smell, hear, whatever. But not everything that you see, hear, feel, taste, hear, whatever, does not need to be retained, right? So for example, I'm giving this presentation, I'm recording this video right now, and I can hear my computer monitor processing, and I can hear the whirling of the fans and everything. Okay, so I can hear the busyness of the computer. Honestly, there's no reason for me to retain the information that I can hear my computer monitor fan blowing. I mean, there's no reason for me to retain that in, say, 1 year or 1 week or 20 years or whatever the case may be. So even though I've experienced it, I'm not going to actively go through and try to retain that memory and that experience, because it's be wasteful to take up space on something like that. And so in that case, I don't go through the activity to retain the information, and so that it's considered to be gone. Okay, so if you follow the arrow to the right, the information's gone. However, I may experience something. May say, for example, I'm recording this video and I experience something like a technical glitch during the recording process. I'm going to remember that. Okay, so it's going to be converted to my short-term memory, and I'm going to be excited or actually really mad about that. And I may rehearse that bit of information, the technical glitch, by telling my husband, I worked all night trying to record those videos, the computer messed up and I'm mad, so I'm rehearsing it and I'm excited. And then I may associate this new experience with old experience. Like, I might say something like, well, it works in the classroom, why isn't it working at home? So I go through those things, and now that short-term memory of this computer glitch is now converted into a long-term memory. Because I had an adequate attitude. I was excited and nervous and anxious. Would have gone through and rehearsed by repeating the information and having association to a previous experience. So now I've just formed a new long-term memory had that happens. And then what happens is here, if you notice the backward arrow between the green and the yellow box, the retrieval, that's the key right there. That's the key to making sure a long-term memory is accessible. So once you form a long-term memory, you have to go back and visit it, revisit it, rehearse it, re-articulate it, whatever the case may be. The more often you retrieve a memory, the more firm that memory becomes, and the more quickly you can recall it, more accurately, more precisely you can recall it. If you do store something in a long-term memory and you never revisit it, it's almost as you've lost it or you've forgotten the experience. So in summary, in order to convert a short-term memory to a long-term memory, you've got to have an adequate emotional state. You've got to be able to rehearse or repeat the information and associate this new experience with some previously stored information in your brain. Once information is stored in long-term memory, we can actually learn that there's multiple subcategories. There's called fact memory and skill memory. Fact memory is alternatively called declarative memory, and as the name implies, it deals with factual information. Okay, so specific bits of information, like what you use here in the classroom. Right? So if I say depolarization is something becomes less negative, you know that depolarization as a charge becomes less negative. So it's factual bits of information. We can do a very quick activity. I'm going to show a video, or not a video, an image for a second, and I want you to obtain as much factual information about the video as you can. Okay, so now I want you to go through and list some factual bits of information that you saw in the image. Some things that you can kind of think about. What did you see? Okay. Obviously you saw a person, so you can give details about that person, about their face structure. You saw their clothing. Okay, so just list some things for yourself that you noticed about that image. Okay, that's testing your factual memory. I want to contrast that to another image. So I'm going to do another image, and we're going to show it for another second, and I want you to test your factual information. Okay. I've now shown two videos that you can extrapolate factual information from. Probably, or typically what I see is in the classroom is in the first scenario, the man that was shown, people will say, oh, he was a nice dressed guy, he had on a light colored suit, and had a fade haircut, nice smile, earrings, tie, they listed all the details about this guy, right? Then when I get to the second image, and actually I'll go back to it, okay, when I get back to the second image, honestly I see the same thing. I see a nice dressed man with a nice light suit, I could have listed all the same features about this man as I did the previous man, right? Okay. However, you probably, when you saw the second image, you just said, that's President Barack Obama. Okay? Instead of saying that's a man in a tie and short haircut, etc. It's because you have previous association memories with Barack Obama. You've seen him in the media. He's all over the place. So when you say President Barack Obama, that implies a man in a suit that's nice looking, etc. Okay, but this is just a quick example to illustrate for you your factual information and how we can build upon existing memories. So factual memory is a type of long-term memory, as well as skill or procedural memory. Procedural memory is doing physical activities. It's kind of implied here in these two images of the kids playing the basketball and the piano. And this is involved with physically doing an activity, or motor memory. And the only way that you're going to better acquire motor memory is actually by doing a physical activity. And so typically motor memories, you don't is described as being retain the context in which it was learned. So for example, the little girl playing the piano, every time she plays key C on the piano, she's probably not going to remember when her teacher taught her the scales or something like that, right? She's going to know the keys by just physically practicing every week or however often. Becomes good with that. Same thing with basketball. And think about things that you do all the time that you take for granted, like brushing your teeth, or putting on your clothes, or brushing your hair, or opening a car door, or whatever the case may be. We don't have to relearn, if you will, that process every time we do it. So every time you tie your shoe, you don't have to revert back to being 4 years old, learning how to do bunny ear loops with your shoestrings, right? You just you can just tie the shoe really quickly. You don't have to think about it. And so what happens is when we have a memory, when we begin to form a long-term memory, there's a lot of events that happen, and honestly, memory is still being studied. But what has been shown is dendrites between cells actually change shape, and at synapses we may see other proteins being laid down between two cells. Presynaptic inputs may increase. Voltage-gated calcium numbers may increase at the presynaptic cell, which you know if there's more gated channels, more calcium could flood in, which means more neurotransmitter could be released. These are just a few things that could physically happen when a memory is formed, right? So dendrites changing shape, voltage-gated calcium channels being laid down, presynaptic inputs changing, right? All kinds of different things happen when a memory is stored. This is a brief summary of memory and how it's formed, and this will conclude this video. You'll look for another video titled 9C for the conclusion of Chapter 9 material.